So equilibrium or balance, if you want to call it that, is all this stuff up here. So we're going to talk first about these three things called the semicircular canals. Their job is particularly called dynamic equilibrium. All right, can someone tell me in English what dynamic equilibrium means?
It means that it's always changing, adjusting.
Always changing or motion, right? So every time I move, I'm using those semicircular canals to register my balance, to determine where I am. So movement, all that kind of stuff. So let's figure out how we do that. So if you look at this picture, you'll notice that there's tubing inside those canals. If you look here, you'll see some funny words, lymph, which means what? Liquid. So in English, we have liquid inside tubes. Let me show you a close-up of the end of those tubes. I'm sure you care. This is showing a close-up of the base of those three semicircular canals. Here's fluid, this blue stuff. Hey, what are those? What are those?
Cilia.
Hair, cilia. Oh, what do hairs do in fluid?
Move.
Move. So now you understand this is exactly like the ear, but for a different sense. So when you move your head, the fluid in these tubes begins to move. It bends the hairs bend the nerve goes to your brain and says, you're moving. It's exactly the same concept as the hearing, just a different part of your ear. And by the way, worth a trivia, why are there three tubes?
Different types of movement.
How many dimensions do you live in?
3.
Now you understand, there's one for each dimension. Right? So no matter how I move my head, at least one of those tubes will move, move the fluid, and bend some hair back. Yes?
And does that go to the cerebellum?
Yes, it does. Very good. The cerebellum, where I do balance and equilibrium, would pick up this information and say, yes, I'm moving my head. It's just like a carpenter's bubble. Every time you move your head, the fluid bends the hairs like this, sending a signal to your brain that you're moving. So semicircular canals is basically a carpenter's level. Looks cool, huh?
Yeah.
All right. So just to show you another picture of this, just to prove I'm not making it up too badly. Where's my picture here? Lost my picture. Where's my girl shaking her head? Here it is. This is showing dynamic equilibrium. She's moving her head, bends the fluid, not even English, makes the fluid move, bends the hairs, brain gets a signal. I'm moving my head. So dynamic equilibrium. But now we have a different problem. We have some other things in the ear, which are these middle things right here. Those are not fluids full of tubes with fluid in them. They have fluid, but it's not the same purpose. Let me show you them up close and personal, which is right here. These are called your vestibules. So we're going to talk about our vestibule now. That's in between the semicircular canal and the cochlea. So vestibule, or vestibulae. Their job is to determine static equilibrium. Can someone tell me in English what static equilibrium means?
When you're standing still.
Standing still. Well, what equilibrium do I need standing still? What do I need to know if I'm standing still?
Isn't it balance?
Balance and what? For what? How do I know I'm standing still?
Upright.
I'm upright. How do I know I'm upright?
Because of one of those
Because
things
you're
about
static
Very good.
equilibrium.
So in English, what you're trying to hint at is static equilibrium is how I detect gravity, where up and down is, and also acceleration. Because gravity is an acceleration. So by static equilibrium, we mean which way is down, is what static equilibrium is. Whenever you're in an elevator, you understand static equilibrium, right? If you feel different gravity, that's this. Well, how does it work, you may ask? Glad you asked. Let's look here. Oh, look what I see! What do I see?
Hairs.
Hairs! With the same logic in every part of the ear. We have hair cells. But these hair cells have rocks on them, called otoliths. Medical terminology, otto, ear, lith, rock, ear rocks.
Oh,
You do have
the
rocks
smart
in your head.
Romans.
Yes. So what do rocks do?
Weigh them down.
They weigh down. Down is the magic word. So when you turn your head, the rocks fall down by gravity, and they knock the hairs sideways. And your brain says, down's over there.
We got marbles in our head.
You have marbles in your head. When I go back the other way, the rocks go this way, and then the hairs that way.
Wow.
So these ones are using otoliths to interpret up and down. So we're going to put, vestibule contains otoliths. Ear rocks. And the rocks bend the hairs to tell you up and down. The semestry canals are just fluid. Right? So this one has fluid. This one has ear rocks.
And similarly, they tell fast, slow by the speed at which.
Yeah, so if you accelerate quickly, the rocks move fast and bend the hairs. If you move slowly, they don't. But they're always going down. Yes?
Which one has to do with vertigo?
Both. Depends on which type of vertigo you have. There's different kinds of vertigo. So we'll do a case study on that in just about 31 seconds.
Under your gravity, does that say acceleration?
Yes. Let me show you another picture of ear rocks. This one I actually like better because it's more graphic. They don't actually look quite like that, but you get to. So here's my vestibule because I have ear rocks and on the little hairs. When she tips her head down, gravity pulls the rocks down. That bends the hairs. Gelatinous material sags in English. And that tells your cerebellum, down's over there now. Down's over here. And then between the rocks and the fluid, your cerebellum can process where's up and down and where am I going in this whole mess. Okay? All right. So let's make something go wrong with you. Let's put you underwater in some kind of scuba thing.
Oh, that's nice.
Why do people get disoriented underwater? Why would that make it hard for you to know?
No gravity.
That's right. If you think about underwater, there's no gravity, right? You're buoyant. So your rocks don't fall anywhere, right? Really? So if you're upside down underwater, you don't know you're upside down underwater. Because the rocks are still where they are. So anytime I lose gravity, the rocks wouldn't fall the right way. My brain doesn't know where down is. And so then I have to use my other clues, like looking or believing, or sunlight or whatever. And that's why they say follow your bubbles. Because bubbles go up. You won't, but the bubbles will. Right? So anytime you mess up the rocks, your brain can't tell up and down.
So what happens if you do like snowboarding and you're like doing a lot of flips and stuff?
They can dislodge.
The
But
otolith?
yeah, they can dislodge.
Ooh.
Yes.
Ooh, bad.
That's not a normal situation. Yes. But anytime you get disoriented, like you don't know where down is, like a vertigo, it's maybe because the rocks are in the wrong spot. Your brain just can't interpret where they are. What we're going to do next. Yeah.
You know when a person shoots up to the top of the water when they're 15 feet, say under,
Uh-huh.
then they get this the sickness where they get
Bends.
the bends. Yes. So does this relate to the bends? Because it's throwing off your equilibrium? I mean, are
Nope.
the stones going down now?
Bends are different. That's a joint disorder because the
Okay.
yes. But the reason you got this while you're underwater and don't know where up is, that's this.
Okay.
Bends is that. So, given this idea, go to your case study again. Find this page and turn to the next page. I'm going to help you do case number 2, then we'll continue loose with it. So here we go. All right, find some. So we have Anna. All right, she gets dizzy, and she hears funny little noises. Okay, so number 1, what sense organs are screwed up in Anna? The hairs, and where are the hairs? Could be my cochlea / because I'm hearing funny noises. But she's also dizzy. So where else could her hair problem be?
Dizzy is the vestibule.
Could be in the vestibule. My semicircular canal is my vestibule. So it could be a balance problem with hair cells here. And it could be a hearing problem with hair cells there. So in English, both of those things in the same place. Where are both these things? The ear. Ear. Your ear does hearing and balance. So both of those things are in the same location. So number 1, ear, to make it easy. Right? Now, your job with your team is I've given you in the next paragraph 2 different diseases, and you're going to figure out which one to answer 2 through 7. And then we'll talk about it in 5 minutes. So see if you can figure out which one she has and why.
said the autoliths are folded in semicircular motion and different fluid filters.
Right. So they break out of the vestibule and go into the
And so
vestibule.
then the other one is the fluid drains into the vestibule.
Yeah, where there's more fluid in the vestibule. Yeah.
Is BVV causes dizziness?
Yes.
It says that the autoliths
Yeah.
are dislodged and float around in the semicircular.
Yeah.
Circular.
They break out of the vestibule and they end up floating in the stomach. Yeah. They're all connected. Yes.
That's more than dislodged.
Yeah.
They dislodge in the wrong end of town. Kind of thing.
Symptoms of
BPV is specific with, like, the onset is whenever a change in position occurs. How does she know that?
Addison's? I don't know.
Like, when that pattern
You notice that, like, it would happen. Well, every time I move, it happens. But when I sit down, it won't. It doesn't read like that's what she says.
She said it's like frequent.
Without warning.
Without warning.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like changing position. Sounds more like whenever I'm not thinking about it.
so she's basically retaining water.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what disorder that is. Oh, it would be Meniere's disease.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Duh.
That's what I was like,
That's retaining water. I would salt reduction and diuretic be. Because sodium helps you retain water. So by having less sodium, you're going to retain at less risk of excess water.
Based on the fact that without warning,
It happens. It's what happens.
yeah, that, like, it's like a fluid BPV. It would be
Got it?
easy with any time.
That's why we did it.
it helps you release water.
Okay,
Days.
so like
Yeah, for water. Yeah,
so then you're expelling.
water.
Mm-hmm.
I think Dr. Dixon.
Oh, it's salt reduction.
Oh,
No, it's vestibular.
The vestibule and the,
vestibulocochlear.
yeah,
So, diuretic drugs, if there's too much.
cranial, which cranial nerve? Vestibule. Oh, I need to look this too.
Yeah, because that's balance and hearing in the ear. Yeah. Vestibulocochlear. Do you agree? Ear.
Okay, let's start going through number 2. So, which disease do you think she had? Meniere's or Meniere's, you can say either way. Let's figure out why Meniere's is a better choice than BPV. If you read BPV, the otoliths dislodge and float around, and whenever a change in position occurs. Well, if you read this, she has the change in position, but that's the otoliths only. That would affect her balance, right? She has hearing things. The otoliths in the semicircular canals would just affect equilibrium. So that doesn't quite cover her symptoms. Meniere's is too much fluid in the vestibule and the cochlea, meaning balance and hearing. So that would cover both of her symptoms, plus the BPBs, whenever she changed position, it doesn't sound like that's the case. It's just happening randomly here and there. So it would be Meniere's. My brother-in-law has this, by the way. All right. So she has Meniere's disease because it's affecting both hearing and balance with fluid. Makes sense? I just balance part. Let's do the doctor thing. Number 3. The doctor says, reduce salt and take diuretics. Why do you do that, Grandpa? Get rid of fluid. If the problem is too much fluid, I want to get fluid out of you. So he's going to have you basically pee a lot to urinate more fluid. So diuretic, remove fluid. And that's also number 4. It's effective because if I remove fluid, I'm going to remove it from all my body. Make sense? So fluid reduction. Let's do number 5. If that doesn't work, my brother-in-law hasn't worked yet, they're going to start cutting some cranial nerves. What cranial nerves are they going to deal with? Let's do that one. So vestibulocochlear. Let's write that one out. What number was that one again? All right. Vestibulo, and there's a reason I put a hyphen in it. That's to remind me that it has 2 jobs. Now you can put it together. The cochlear half goes from my hearing. So the cochlear branch is to hear. The vestibulo branch is for balance and equilibrium. So essentially you have 2 nerves that combine to form one cranial nerve. So the vestibulo and cochlear branches deal balance and hearing because they're both from the same ear. So if I show you an ear picture, this should be one. If you look back here, here's my vestibulocochlear nerve. You notice it has 2 branches. One comes off the cochlea, the other half comes off the balance stuff. So vestibulocochlear nerve. That's why they changed the name from auditory, because it wasn't just hearing. Make sense?
So they would cut off that, I mean, yeah. They would
Well, let's
just,
figure out which branch they want to cut.
okay.
You don't want to cut both. Well, I guess you can. You're the doctors. Which one would be the best choice to cut if you had to cut one?
Vestibular.
The balance. So they're going to cut the vestibulo part off. Why would that help?
Because the vestibule is where part of the issue is, and it's where all of the dizziness and all of that is coming
That's
from.
right. So dizziness is when your brain's getting incorrect balance information. Your brain can't make sense of what's going on, so you feel sick. If you think about it, this is just you as trivia. Nausea is your brain's way to make you lie on the floor. Because the brain says, if I put you on the floor sick, all those rocks should stop moving, right? I mean, you're on the floor crying. So when you can't make sense of your motion, the brain's response is to make you dizzy and fall down. That will stop everything. So if I turn off your ear so the brain can't get the message, the brain doesn't know what the rocks and the fluid are doing. Therefore, the brain thinks everything's okay because nothing's moving. Right? It doesn't know you're numb. It just knows that they're not there. Make sense?
So,
Cutting the vestibular branch, we reduce that input. Yes.
so 6 is the vestibular.
No, 8.
Yes. 5 would be the vestibulocochlear nerve, and the branch would be the vestibular branch. And why
Okay.
is it effective? Because it turns off the brain's input of equilibrium. The brain wouldn't know it's there.
But only from one side, right?
Yeah, if it's only one side, you do the one side. If it's both. Yeah.
You lose your ability to balance?
Yes, partially. With your eyes closed, you would.
Oh, so the vision then is how bad
Yeah.
it is at that point.
Right. So you can use your vision, you can use your muscles or arm, just wouldn't have your ears. Let's do number 7. So what would happen if the doctor screwed up and cut your cochlear branch instead?
You're not going to be able to hear.
You'd be deaf with dizziness. That's great. Right? Because that would be no hearing from my ear, which would be bad. So you hope they cut the right one. I'm going to cut vestibulo and not cochlear. Right? So you do the one and not the other. Make sense? So there's a problem with your ear sending the wrong balance information. Yes.
So now that we've talked about all this, how does it relate to motion sickness? Like,
Oh!
why do some people get way more motion sickness and others get none? Or...
Magic.
It's mental.
That's
what I tell my husband.
Children get less motion sick than adults. You've seen that. Kids go flying all over everything. And then I look at a merry-go-round and I just start to vomit. Right? But there's a hierarchy. So when the brain is determining your balance, it looks at the ear information, looks at muscle information, looks at visual information. And the brain tries to make sense of all those three things. So I'll give you an example. Imagine you're sitting in the back of a windy road bus driving to the beach reading a book, right? You're going to get sick for most people because what your eyes are seeing, which is the book, don't match what the ears are feeling on the road. So the brain says, I don't know what's right, I'm going to make you throw up and lie down to reset one of these. But if you're driving the car, you don't get sick. Why not?
You're controlling the movement.
Right. What I see and what I feel and what I'm are all matching up. I see the road, I feel the road, I am the road. Everything's cool. It's only when there's a disconnect between the eyes, the ears, and the muscles, the brain says throw up. That's motion
So would
sickness.
sitting in the front seat reduce that?
Yeah, as long as you look out the front. Yeah, because what you see and what you feel are roughly the same. If you start looking out the side window, then you get sick.
So, but on a boat, you're seeing it rock, and you're still.
So a lot of times what you're doing is you're watching like the horizon.
Yeah.
That's why you lose your horizon. It's the worst kind of.
Right. You're down the hold of the ship and you're doing right.
Okay.
Yeah, your sea legs are learning to match your motion to the boat. Or pilot's legs.
Shift too.
Yeah, yeah. So doing okay on her problem with Meunier. She has too much movement in her vestibule, so her brain's getting overstimulated with equilibrium.
So it wasn't related to the BPV because she's not changing positions.
Right.
No
And
matter
it's not
what
just her
position
balance.
she's in. Okay.
Right. Let me just show you one more time. Oh, let's do a little
The
video.
vestibular system has important sensory and motor functions, contributing to the perception of self-motion, head position, and spatial orientation relative to gravity. The function of the vestibular system can be simplified by remembering some basic terminology of classical mechanics. All bodies moving in 3 dimensions have 6 degrees of freedom. 3 of these are translational, and 3 are rotational. The translational components may be given in terms of movements along the x, y, and z axes of the head.
Please don't learn this. I mean, you can't. It's physics. But.
Rotations about the x, y, and z axes are commonly referred to as roll,
That would hurt.
pitch, and yaw. The positive direction of head rotation follows
It
a
gets
right
more
hand
biological
rule.
in a minute.
That is, if the fingers of the right hand are curled in the direction of the arrows, the thumb points in the positive direction of the axis.
Really, no one cares.
Buried deep in the temporal
There's
bone,
no where we care.
the main peripheral component of the vestibular system is an elaborate set of interconnected chambers, the labyrinth, that has much in common and is in fact continuous with the cochlea.
Okay, so that's a point to remember is that the whole ear is one thing. So the hearing, the balance, they're all basically one set of tubes full of hair and fluid. So that's why next time you get an ear infection, you wonder why you're dizzy a lot, right? It's all the same plumbing and wiring. So it's very easy for one thing to affect the other one. So she got dizziness and balance in the case study because you affected basically both sets of pipes and tubes. So the bony labyrinth in lab today is what they're talking about is all that together. The snail, the tubes, the rocks. That sounds so scientific. Right? Snails,
The
tubes, and rocks.
labyrinth consists of the 2 otolith organs, the utricle and saccule,
That's
and
the name
3
of the rock.
semicircular canals. The vestibular hair cells, which, like cochlear hair cells, transduce minute displacements into behaviorally relevant receptor potentials, are located in the utricle and saccule.
What did she just say there in English?
No idea.
Vestibular hair cells which like cochlear hairs transduce minute displacement with behaviorally relevant receptive potentials. In English, what did that just say?
Slow down.
So the hairs,
They're moving.
transduce means they respond to movement, displacement.
Small.
Relevant receptor potentials means they send a signal. So in English, when I bend the hairs, they send an impulse.
Wow, that's
That's Saladin speak.
And in 3 jug-like swellings called ampullae, located at the base of the semicircular canals next to the utricle.
So in English, you have hairs in all those spots that will bend and send your brain a message.
So those little cones that are sticking in, they're saying, those little cones that are sticking in are called the ampullae.
Yeah, the ampulla is the end of the
Ampulla.
canal.
It's the end.
So the ampulla is like a ball.
And saccule. The sensory epithelium, or macula, consists of hair cells and associated supporting cells. Overlying the hair cells and their
That's the
stereocilia
hair.
is a gelatinous layer. Above this layer is a fibrous structure, the otolithic membrane, in which are embedded crystals of calcium carbonate called otoconia.
Or autolyths.
The crystals give the otolith organs their name. Otolith is Greek for ear stones. The otoconia make the otolithic membrane considerably heavier than the structures and fluids surrounding it. Thus, when the head tilts, gravity causes the membrane to shift relative to the sensory epithelium. The resulting shearing motion between the otolithic membrane and the macula displaces the hair bundles, which are embedded in the lower gelatinous surface of the membrane. This displacement of the hair bundles generates a receptor potential in the hair cells that is dependent upon the direction of tilt. Movement of the stereocilia toward the kinocilium causes potassium channels to open, depolarizing the hair cell. The depolarization results in neurotransmitter release and excitation of the vestibular nerve fibers. Movement of the stereocilia in the direction away from the kinocilium closes the channels, hyperpolarizing the hair cell, and thus reducing vestibular nerve activity. A shearing motion between the macula and the otolithic membrane also occurs when the head undergoes linear accelerations. Hair bundle displacement occurs transiently in response to linear accelerations and tonically in response to tilting of the head.
I have no idea what she just said.
Whereas the otolith organs are primarily concerned with head translations and orientation with respect to gravity, the semicircular canal sense head rotations arising either from self-induced movements or from angular accelerations of the head imparted by external forces. Each of the three semicircular canals has at its base a bulbous expansion called the ampulla, which houses the sensory epithelium, or crista, that contains the hair cells.
This is all stuff we're
The
gonna
structure
learn
of the canal suggests how they detect the angular accelerations that arise through rotation of the head. The hair bundles extend out of the crista into a gelatinous mass, the cupula, that bridges the width of the ampulla, forming a viscous barrier through which endolymph cannot circulate. As a result, the relatively compliant cupula is distorted by movements of the endolymphatic fluid.
In English,
Wow.
the fluid bends the snot, which bends the hairs. That's what she's trying to say there.
When the head turns in the plane of one of the semicircular canals, the inertia of the endolymph produces a force across the cupula, distending it away from the direction of head movement and causing a displacement of the hair bundles within the crista. In contrast, linear accelerations of the head produce equal forces on the two sides of the cupula, so the hair bundles are not displaced.
So in English, if I move my head one way or the other, one of those tubes will have the fluid spin, bending some of the hairs, not all of them. If I just, keep my head still, the fluid should be even on all the sides so they don't bend in either direction. So my brain wouldn't get the
So
message.
if you damage one of the canals, does that mean you're damaging one of the planes? So you
Basically,
have
yes.
difficulty looking up and down when you're flying side to side.
That's right. As long as your other side's okay, at least get one of them. But yeah, in theory, there's one for each plane. If you damage that, you wouldn't get acceleration of that movement.
Each semicircular canal works in concert with the partner located on the other side of the head that has its hair cells aligned oppositely. There are three such pairs. One pair of horizontal canals and the superior canal on each side working with the posterior canal on the other side. Both are in the same plane. The orientation of the horizontal canals makes them selectively sensitive to rotation in the horizontal plane. More specifically, the hair cells in the canal toward which the head is turning are depolarized, while those on the other side are hyperpolarized.
So the
For
brain would know
example,
which way.
when the head turns to the left, the cupula is pushed toward the kinocilium in the left horizontal canal, and the firing rate of the relevant axons in the left vestibular nerve increases. In contrast, the cupula in the right horizontal canal is pushed away from the kinocilium, with a concomitant decrease in the firing rate of the related neurons. If the head turns to the right, the result is just the opposite.
So in English, what she's trying to say, If I go one way, one tube, quote, speeds up a signal, the other opposite tube turns down the signal. The brain knows it's this direction, and the opposite occurs that way. So every time you move your head, the brain will know right from left, in addition to just that you're moving, by using those neurons. That's kind of what means.
This push-pull arrangement operates for all three pairs of canals. The pair whose activity is modulated is in the plane of the rotation, and the member of the pair whose activity is increased is on the side toward which the head is turning. The net result is a system that provides information about the rotation of the head in any direction.
Yes?
So is this part of the basal ganglia area, Eugene?
The basal ganglia don't look at this directly. The cerebellum, though, does. So when the basal ganglia kick in an algorithm, and say, walk, basically the cerebellum has to get told, the basal ganglia said walk, and the cerebellum then checks this to make sure you're not falling down as you're walking.
Because it's checking balance.
It's checking balance and coordination. So all the basal ganglia do is turn on the walk program and hope the cerebellum is doing its job of keeping you upright.
Ah.
Yeah, there's an interconnect, but the basal ganglia directly don't check balance.
Okay,
They just set the motion, the cerebellum then has to do it. So, and then there's this little blurb here. Certain types of body acceleration, a boat, car plane, roller coaster. Here's the misery of sickness, right? So these are things where there's a discrepancy between what your ear is feeling and what, say, your eyes are seeing. So the brain can't make sense, so the idea is to make you sick and fall down, right? In a car, and a plane, roller coaster. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, doing good at balance and hearing. We have two more simple senses to learn. They're actually the quickest and easiest to learn. And that is taste and smell. They're the same answer. So what makes life easy is what they are. So here is a tongue, in case you're wondering what this is. If you look here, you have taste buds, but they're not what your mom told you. This is the correct mom. They're not the bumps on your tongue. They're below the bumps on your tongue. So the actual taste buds are down in your tongue, down in those grooves. But we're going to look at a taste bud. Here are taste buds. What do you see poking out of the taste bud?
Hair.
Little hairs. Damn hair. But this is a different kind of hair than the hair we've been talking about. The hair we've been talking about has been bending and turning on neurons. These ones are called gustatory hairs. They have a different job. They are a chemoreceptor. So now we're going to learn our chemoreceptors. So on our tongue, totally different body part, the taste. So the taste is relying on chemoreceptors. They're still hairs, but they're different. Remember, the ear was a mechanoreceptor, vibration. So the hairs in my ear detect vibration. The hairs on my tongue do chemo. What does chemo stand for?
Chemical.
Chemical. So they're actually a receptor that binds to a chemical. So next time you eat something, the chemical goes down your tongue and actually lands on the hair and makes a chemical reaction, binds to the receptor. And these are connected to a nerve fiber that sends a message to your brain that I just ate pasta or whatever. Chocolate is there. So each chemical that you can taste, in theory, lands on a hair and sends a signal to your brain to interpret as taste. So again, it's not that your tongue doesn't taste, the brain tastes from the information from the tongue.
What about texture? Does it?
It also detects texture. That's more the sensation. These do somewhat, the chemical texture. And the physical texture would be what they call mouthfeel, which is the rest of it.
So are the chemoreceptors on the gustatory
Yes.
hair?
The gustatory hair officially is the chemoreceptor.
Okay, so that's another.
They're basically the same.
Okay.
Let me show you a different picture and a different body part and see if you can answer the question of what this is for and how this works. This is a nose, olfaction. Hey, what do you see sticking down in your nose?
Taste buds.
Hair.
Yeah, taste buds. Very thought, yes. Here they just call olfactory hairs, but the same concept. These are chemoreceptors. This is not a bending hair. This is a pick up a chemical hair. So you smell a skunk. You whiff that in. The chemical lands on the hairs. These are chemoreceptors. And they send a fire impulse to your brain saying, I smelt me a skunk. But it's the same concept. Different chemicals land on different hairs. and send a different signal. Your brain interprets that as skunk versus Chanel number 5. That's based upon the combination of hairs that the brain is receiving information from. So the nose just sends a signal, the brain interprets that as great or bad. Yes.
So your nose and your mouth are obviously so very close.
Yes.
They both have cilia.
Yep.
So if you smell something, can you taste it?
Yes.
And vice versa.
Yes. Every restaurant industry owes their allegiance to that. The smell of the food
Chocolate.
is actually what you're buying. And you know that when you have a cold. What do things taste like when you have a cold?
Nothing.
Why not? Your tongue works fine.
Your nose.
Your nose is plugged. Every chef knows that. You're smelling the food and getting the
Your
taste
hairs
out of
have
the
been
smell
slimed.
more than the taste.
It's,
Your taste is very limited. You have 5 tastes, roughly, and that's it. But the smell is a lot more, you have a lot more smell. Your brain's much better with smell. So we believe that most of what you're tasting is the smell of the food, the aroma. You know, if your restaurant's next to a feedlot, you're probably not going to get a lot of business. Okay? Just because the smell's bad. But it's the same concept. Chemicals land on the hairs, the brain interprets that as roast beef with fries. That's why Burger King vents their stove, right? You know, over there, they can blow that Whopper out in the street, and I'm driving right in for it. That's what they did. They all learned that trick. Make sense? So your chemoreception.
When they make the cookies.
Okay, and chemoreception? This is very simple. Mouth and nose are basically the same concept.
So should we write down then the smell of the olfactory?
Yeah, officially it's olfactory hair, not a gustatory hair. But it's the same. It's still a chemoreceptor. Exactly the same. And your brain's interpreting that as taste and smell. So now what we're going to do is talk about your exam that's coming up. But before we do that, I do have one thing to figure out, and that is, has everyone signed up for a drug project yet? Because the deadline is today to do that. I only have, I think, 3. Let me just find the ones I have here.
Hey, do you have Band-Aid?
oh, I do.
I have gabapentin, Truvada, and Immersa drug. Was there anyone else that decided to tell me what it was? Other than yours.
I'm sorry.
I didn't know what you were doing, evening or day.
Take that personally.
My sister's
But it'll take out.
my sister's name is Courtney, and she spells it with a K.
Are there any other drugs? What was yours? Johnson, that's right. Let's get back to you.
2 week attitude.
Oh, we have.
Chantel, I was just saying how the computer doesn't think our names are spelled correctly.
I know. Always. Sorry if we like.
And it usually blocks mine, like I had to add it to my.
Anyone else have a drug
Not
instead of
say
here?
it's wrong.
Stop asking.
Fine, we'll do week 6.
I still like Genio.
Oh, I just
Whatever
deleted
it
my
was
stuff.
that our text wanted to call it.
Yeah.
Love. What was that? Something love. What did yours say?
Mine was adore ego and then adore
Okay,
ethic.
anyone else? If you haven't picked a drug,
And
just
mine
let me
was
know soon.
some
So
deny genie.
who's
or
your group? I
something
got
like
some of
that.
the groups, but not all. Okay, let's talk about your exam then. I got that taken care of.
Yeah, it was denied genie.
Your exam is like your quizzes, you know, take clinical application. Let's go through what I have. The first page is a whole lot of brain damage, stroke kind of questions. If Grandpa had a stroke in this lobe, what would you see? If I have this symptom, what part of my brain is damaged? So a lot of the wiring we learned the first week of class. You know, Jonathan shot himself in his right parietal lobe. You know, I thought of it. All right, not seriously. All right, so be able to go through each of the brain parts. What would happen if it's damaged? What side would be affected? What symptoms would I see? You know, that kind of stuff. If I couldn't do this, I could do that. Okay, then there's some specific questions on the language areas, Broca's versus Wernicke's. What's the difference between those? What would you see or hear differently between them? All right, then there's a couple questions on the flow of CSF. Thou shalt be able to tell me where it starts, where it goes, and how it gets back there when it does.
Wernicke's.
CSF flow. What would happen if I plug your cerebral aqueduct? What would happen if I do this? What would happen if I do that? So CSF circulation. Be able to draw that out for me. All right, there are 2 questions on the integrative brain areas. That would be the insula, the RAS, the basal ganglia, the memory, motor Mirror cell. I can't even figure out what I'm calling them anymore. Right?
You said 2 questions in that?
I have 2 questions so far then. What do those things do? What would happen if it didn't work? Kind of general stuff. All right, there are 3 questions on the cranial nerves that thou shalt know, thou shalt. Name, number, type, and function. Be able to give those to me verbatim. And what would happen if cranial nerve number 2 wasn't working? What happened if cranial nerve 5 was busted?
Foramen?
Not for lecture. Yes?
Just like that basic chart you had us construct, right?
Right. Some kind of dirty rhyme, whatever. Then there are 3 questions.
Verbatim.
5 questions on the ANS. Like today's quiz. Give me which branch it is, short versus long, where on the spine, what neurotransmitters, what receptors, make it go more, make it go less. Be able to quote that back to me. All right, then we have 2 questions on photoreceptors/vision, like the difference between rods and cones. What would happen if you didn't have any rods? What would happen if you didn't have any cones? That kind of stuff. There's a question on hearing, specifically deafness. How can I make you not hear? That kind of stuff. There are a couple questions on equilibrium. So what are the differences between these? What would happen to you if, like the case study we just did on Meuniers? There's a question on taste and or smell. Basically the same thing, right? One of those. And I think that is all I have written down at this point. I reserve the right to change it as I see fit. Like a credit card. So far it's 40 points. That's so far.
I like how
It
you
may be
kept
different when
the
I
disclaimer.
Yeah.
In that, did you watch the last part
Uh-huh.
of the hearing, semicircular canals and stuff like that, like, onto that?
Not the anatomy part, just understand like this, what would happen.
Physiology.
Physiology of bending the hair.
Not the anatomy.
Yeah. You'll get that in lab with Krista. So questions? The rest of your time is yours to study for your tests, leave early, be in lab, usual drill. Thank you for shopping here. We know you have choices in community college. We appreciate that you're here. My wife and children appreciate that you're here. Yeah. That's usually the best place to read it. Yeah, no, they find the magic picture. Magic picture is
So frustrating when you don't do as well in your quiz, don't necessarily understand your verbiage is different.
Yeah.
Like I get the makeup, like the short and long and
Oh yeah.
first term when you like stuff. I think those like
So most systems
it's like the function and something like
Yeah, I had a.
used different verbs. Yes. Different words. It's like, well, I understood it.
Whoops, sorry.
That's not the word.
Okay.